This isn't the real Caesar's Palace, is it?
What do you mean?
Did Caesar live here?
No.
I didn't think so.
I went to Vegas last weekend. Pretty crazy.
Vegas, baby, Vegas!
Gentlemen, welcome to Las Vegas.
Why don't you give me half the money you were gonna bet? Then we'll go out back, I'll kick you in the nuts, and we'll call it a day.
Some guys just can't handle Vegas.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 41 of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'll be your guide for this podcast journey to what I like to consider the best place on earth, fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I want to start by thanking my guest from the last episode of the show, Amanda Riley of the Neon Museum, Las Vegas. It was great chatting with Amanda about the museum's huge collection of vintage iconic neon signs and their love for a very special part of Vegas history. If you haven't had a chance to listen yet, pop into the archives wherever you get your podcasts and search out episode number 40 of the show, or head to the website at jeffdoesvegas.com and check it out there. And speaking of the website, thanks to everyone who's taken the time to do the audience survey. If you've got a few spare minutes, I'd really appreciate you sharing your feedback with me, good, bad, or indifferent. Just click the audience survey link at jeffdoesvegas.com and let me know what you think. All right, let's get things going. We begin with Vegas news you can use. Starting off with some big news for fans of comedian Carrot Top, the world-renowned prop comic who's been entertaining Vegas audiences for 15 years has signed a contract extension with MGM Resorts that'll see him stay at the Luxor through to 2025. With the extension of his residency at the Luxor, Carrot Top is set to become the longest-running comedy show in MGM Resorts history. Carrot Top currently performs 6 nights a week inside the Atrium showroom at the Luxor. Congratulations to a couple of great shows on the Strip that recently hit big milestones. The Bronx Wanderers, who got their Vegas start at Bally's and now call the Matt Franco Theater at the Link home, recently celebrated their 1,000th show in Las Vegas. And Crazy Girls, the longest-running topless review ever in Las Vegas, hit a major mark, its 32nd anniversary. The show ran at the now-gone legendary Riviera for an incredible 28 years before making the move to the Sin City Theater in Planet Hollywood back in 2015. And if you're going to be in Vegas mid-November and you're interested in checking out the Mob Museum, listen up. The Mob Museum will be celebrating Kefauver Day on November 15th with free admission for Nevada residents and buy one, get one free offers for visitors. This is in honor of the 69th anniversary of the Kefauver Committee hearings into the world of organized crime, which occurred in the actual courtroom at the Mob Museum back on November 15th, 1950. If you want to learn more about Vegas's mob history, the Kefauver hearings, and the Mob Museum, jump into the archives at jeffdoesvegas.com and check out episode number 22 of the podcast. And that's Vegas news you can use. On to the show. All right, I've got a very simple question for you. Do you believe in ghosts? If your answer is yes, then this is the episode for you. And honestly, even if your answer is no, you're still going to love this episode. With Vegas's somewhat shady past and tales of tragedy and insanity, it should come as no surprise that Sin City is blessed with its own share of spookiness. A quick Google search will reveal multiple spots both on and off the Vegas Strip that are believed to be haunted by the spirits of the famous, the infamous, and the not-so-famous. My guest for this episode of the podcast is Josef Kruger of Las Vegas Ghost Tours. Josef was kind enough to jump on the show with me to talk about some of the creepiest and strangest stories of Las Vegas spooks and spectres. Which hotel was ravaged by a fire that killed 85 of its guests, some of whom haven't checked out quite yet? What resort is believed to be haunted by the spirit of its infamous gangster owner? And where in Las Vegas can you go to hang out with a murdered rap superstar? Time to find out the answers to these questions and many more. Please enjoy my conversation with Josef Kruger of Las Vegas Ghost Tours. Well, Josef, first of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. I really do appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy with a lot of stuff going on, so again, I really do appreciate it.
Oh, no, it's all my pleasure. I love talking about the stories and the locations. It's definitely worth it.
So let's first start off by talking about Las Vegas Ghosts. This is a very cool little tour, and as I was saying before we kind of started recording here, you know, I do a lot of trips to Las Vegas, and I know there's a lot of frequent visitors to Vegas, and people maybe are starting to get burned out on some of the big touristy type things. And I know I personally am starting to look for different stuff. And of course, with, you know, Halloween approaching, people are looking to get a little bit spooked out. Tell us a little bit about Las Vegas Ghosts.
Vegas Ghosts, we wanted to try something different, like you said, than just the normal sightseeing stuff. And the more we researched, the more we found, okay, well, you know, not just that celebrities visit here, not just that, you know, weird things happen, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we just started finding all these stories, not at just one or two locations, but at so many different hotels, so many different popular attractions that people go to, you know, gamble, to spend their vacations, to hang out. And we started, you know, noticing a trend of, not only, you know, do they have a lot of historical background behind them, but there's some really crazy stuff that happened, number one. And number two, because of that crazy stuff, now where we get all these reports of, okay, there's a lot of paranormal activity going, you know, in a lot of these places. So we try to focus on, of course, giving the history of the location so people know that, okay, this is a real thing. Like these things actually happen here. People died or committed suicide or murdered or whatever happened at that place. And then we say, all right, we go with, okay, and now what has that caused to happen at this specific location? What's the activity that people see? Is it, you know, just, do they feel it? Do they see it? Do they hear it? Is it a combination of all of it? So as we started doing all this research, we thought, hey, we can put together a really good tour, a ghost tour and a route where people can not just go to one location, but go to multiple locations and hear the history, some little bit of mystery, and some really good stories of ghost sightings and ghost hauntings, and maybe hopefully experience something for themselves.
And let's talk about the guides on this tour. I mean, that's got to be one of the most fun gigs in Las Vegas.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of people trying to, you know, it is definitely one of the tourism hubs of the country and of the world. So we have a lot of people trying to get in there, but we really try to focus on quality. So what we do is we have the script, you know, we have the stories that we've researched with the interviews that we've done, and we have the route, and we give them a trial period to learn this script, to go out there and walk the route, to actually be at the locations. And of course, we only use locals who have been there for a long time, who actually know a lot of these stories, who actually contribute to some of the scripts instead of the ghost sightings. So right now, we have a few guides operating, especially during Halloween, but one of our two best guides right now are Kelly Lutzker and Daniela Tomic. And you know, they go on these tours and people think, okay, you know what, they're going to be pointing at windows and saying, oh, you might see an orb or a flash of light, but they actually have to know over 40 pages of material of the history, the background, the ghost sightings, and they make it, it's almost like a Broadway performance, and the people really, really get into it. And the guides are everything. Without the guides, we would have nothing. So they really love their job, and we have some really high retention because, I mean, they're basically walking down the streets of Vegas every night, 7 days a week, showing people their city, and of course that unique twist of, hey, you might not know, but there's some crazier stuff that happens here than people think.
You guys are not messing around with this stuff. This is not amateur hour by any stretch of the imagination, is it?
No, not at all. Like I said, we've gone on to other tours and we've, you know, done research and we've checked places out. But that's what I think we try to set our tours apart, is that the authenticity, the research, the interviews that we do, eyewitness accounts. And if we ever get more information or we hear of another sighting, we'll go in and try to investigate it and see, hey, is that something we want to add to our tour? Is that something that's reliable? Because, yeah, part of it is going to be subjective. You know, we have skeptics and we have believers. And we ask that on the tour. We say, okay, who here actually believes in ghosts? Who's actually feels like they've actually had an experience, and who are the skeptics? And like, okay, well, everybody, it's your choice to decide for yourselves. But we a lot of times we have people reach out and say, well, you'll never believe what happened on the tour. Or after I went on your tour, I went home and I found out that someone got murdered in my house, and this is so cool, and my house is haunted. I mean, people really get into this, whether they're believers or skeptics.
That's so awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the tours. You guys do have two different types of tours, correct?
That's correct. The basic one that we have, and for Vegas, and we're going to be branching out some more, but the basic one we have is we just call it a regular tour. We go to up to eight different locations in a small, radius, because it's a walking tour. And we have headsets for people to listen to, because Vegas is a loud city. We go to several hotels, different spots, and we can go over those locations if you want. I can give you the list of locations. And then we have what's called an extended bonus tour, where it's like an extension that you can add on for a few more locations. Now, what we like to throw in there as a twist is you can actually rent ghost equipment if you choose. And we're starting a ghost hunt where basically, so on the regular tour, people can rent an EMF detector. They have an EVP recorder. They can, try to catch stuff on audio, which we can analyze later. We, of course, encourage pictures. We have our own, camera. We try to take pictures, but we really try to get the guests involved. But on the ghost hunt, which we're developing right now, which is in addition to the regular and the extended tour, everybody gets an EMF detector. We have the EVP recording, and we have what's called a spirit box. A lot of people might not have heard of it, but basically it scans radio frequencies, and when there's a connection made, basically it stops on that radio station after you ask certain questions, and it gives a response. And you can't control it, but a lot of it is clear. For example, you might say, okay, did someone die here recently? And it'll be buzzing through the radio stations, and stop and say yes, 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 over and over. How many people? 3, 3, 3. Or what's even creepier is when you say, okay, are you okay with us communicating with you here tonight? No, leave. So whether you believe it or not, it's some really strange stuff happens.
So here's a question that I'll just toss in as my own little follow-up to that. Do you guys provide spare pairs of pants for people? Because I'm not going to lie to you. If I was standing there and that happened, I'd be instant poop right there. That's how that's happening.
We've joked about, honestly, that's a funny question, because we've joked about, having like a bag of diapers as a joke, and say, okay, for anyone, who does that. Or I've actually, done tours. I'm a licensed tour guide myself. So I've, done tours in different cities, and I'll say, okay, just so you guys know, we usually lose about 1 or 2 people by the end of the tour, but no worries. Sometimes they turn up, but I stopped making that joke because people would take me seriously. And so we want to give them a shocking, spooky, creepy experience, but we don't want to scare them completely, so they leave the tour and never come back,
Right. Now, you mentioned touring around to 8 locations, and we'll get into some of those a little bit later on and some of the details. But I guess the question that I would like to ask here is, do you guys ever get any kind of pushback from the properties that you go to or the places you go to? I mean, if you're going into a specific hotel and touring through a group of people and going, this place is haunted and people died here and do any of these places get a little, maybe you shouldn't be here kind of thing with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing about Vegas is that people want to make money. These hotels want to make money. And if there's a way we can spin it into it's an attraction. For example, when they started doing nuclear testing back in the 30s and 40s, people thought Vegas was going to completely shut down and no one was going to come back. And instead, the tourism industry said, hey, guess what? Let's go ahead and market this as, you'll never believe they actually, tested nuclear bombs here, and come see the site of, the first A-bomb that blew up, and see the ghost towns that they built for these, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we'll have some places that when we tell people what happened there, and we'll say, oh, are you actually staying at the hotel? Oh, maybe you want to switch. Obviously, they're not going to like that. But for the most part, it brings people into their business at the bars in the hotel lobby to drink before or after the tour. I'd say a good majority of people actually find it more interesting rather than scary. And it's also almost makes them think, okay, now Vegas just became that much cooler. But yes, we do have, some relationships that we can't actually go all the way into the buildings, all the way where we want to go, or the hotels or that kind of stuff because of that. And that's just, they don't want to lose business. They don't want to have a really bad, bad reputation. But if the whole point of this is that we're teaching people the history of these locations. And, once we convince the owners or that it's just, hey, these people are going to find this out on their own anyway. And honestly, good publicity is publicity, good or bad. That's what I've been accustomed to in marketing. If you can get someone to pay attention, you can spin it your way.
Have you ever had any celebrities join you guys on your tours?
So now that's a good question. We've only been in operation a couple years, and as far as I know, we haven't had any big celebrities. We've had a few comedians that are not well known that might stop by, or people that are local to Vegas. So the only celebrities that I can say that join us on our tours are actually the dead ones, the ones that are haunting some of these locations. And when I say that in all seriousness because we've had not just tour guides, but tourists or even locals, say, oh my gosh, I definitely just saw Bugsy Siegel, exactly how he's described in the story or how he is in history. Or, hey, that's crazy, but I swore I just saw someone who looked exactly like Tupac wandering around on your tour with you. And, some people might be making it up, but when it happens over and over again at some of these locations, that's what draws people to these ghost tours, is that most of these places are celebrities that have died there or people who founded the hotels or that kind of stuff. So I hope, I'm crossing my fingers that we can get it out there. We'll have, some people, but hey, you never know. A lot of times celebrities dress up in disguise. So we might have had one on our tour and not known it,
For some reason, I feel like the dead celebrities are cooler than the living ones.
Right, exactly. Yeah, someone with a scarf and glasses, who might not even tell us that they're there, versus someone who's like, okay, you can definitely tell that this person is maybe not where they belong. I think I'd rather have a dead celebrity on a ghost tour than a live one, but I'll take either one, honestly.
That's so cool. Well, Joseph, I do want to talk about the some of the locations that you guys visit and some of the specifically haunted spots in Las Vegas. I mean, Vegas has this, the reputation of Sin City pretty much, forever. And of course, with the mob and some of the shady goings ons, it's pretty ripe for haunting, isn't it?
100%. If I had to pick one city that we get more people asking about, okay, because you can make a list of the most haunted cities in the U.S. and every single list will be different. You got Gettysburg on there, you have Salem, of course, Charleston, and everyone is different for a different reason. But one that is specifically, I guess you could say, haunted, but also has that, okay, this is Sin City and everybody knows who these people are. It's not just, nothing against a Civil War Confederate soldier, but people can actually, these places are recognizable nationwide, even worldwide. So when people, know the hotels and locations, but then up in there, they're like, okay, like I said, it just takes it to another level.
Well, let's talk about some of these specific spots in Las Vegas. I've got a list of ones that I kind of want to go over. And let's start with one of my favorite hotels on the Vegas Strip. I'm a regular there. I stay there on a pretty regular basis. Now I'm questioning that decision. Let's talk about Bally's.
Oh, Bally's. Okay. So can I ask you a question? Is there a reason why that's one of your favorite places?
I've always been a fan of the location. It's, right mid-strip, dead center, all the action, close to everything, always get reasonable rates, but I'm starting to think maybe there's a reason I'm getting those reasonable rates.
Right. Well, there really might be. What we like to talk about Bally's Las Vegas is almost like an old Vegas charm with modern amenities, So, of course, it's right there on the Strip. It's dead center. Used to be where the MGM Grand Hotel stood. And, whether you know the history or not, it's definitely an iconic spot. But once you hear not just what happened at this location, but the fact that they still use, of course, like the same area to house guests, and they still bring people through the same places where many, many people died. Like you said, it can either, make you get some cut rate amenities and rooms, or it could just drive everyone away, depending on who you are. So I don't know if you know what the biggest thing that happened and it's not just in Las Vegas, but many people say in Nevada's history is the fire of 1980.
Right.
If you've stayed there in Las Vegas and you've been there, a lot of people know a little bit of the story. But basically, it's November of 1980. Fire breaks out and it engulfs the entire hotel's towers and casino. and it injured 700 guests, employees, and firefighters, but actually killed over 80 people, 87 to be exact. And what's sad is that, when we're doing our research, that the MGM, the original MGM, they decided not to install a fire alarm system that probably would have saved a lot of those people. So you have 87 people whose lives were worth about $192,000 that the system would have cost. And of course, for Vegas, that's not a huge number. So it's sad, but the tower, one of the original towers, is where that still operates today, and 61 of the 87 deaths actually occurred there, and that's where most of the hauntings actually take place. And when you go on the tour, whether you believe this stuff or not, and whether you think that these deaths and these supposed hauntings actually make a difference, once you start hearing the story, people start exhibiting something, the symptoms that we talk about. So, for example, yes, when I start the tour, I ask people again, hey, not just did you have experience, but how did you make you feel? Some people were like, oh, I was visited by my grandfather and it was nice. Most people are like, I got the chills. I saw an old lady sitting in the rocking chair, or, a mirror fell and broke and I just got nauseous. And this place at Bally's is where people actually tend to get those negative feelings while they're on the ghost tour. And that might sound bad, but I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why they're on there. They want to experience something.
And those negative feelings would make sense there, considering it's not like, your grandpa peacefully passing away in his bed in his sleep. That's 87 people dying in sheer terror.
Yeah, sheer terror, not just, and it's not just, I don't know if I could choose between, burning alive or suffocating, but 85 of those people died from smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning in the stairwell. So, I don't like to make, like 9/11 references or anything like that. But the point is, if you're being serious and you're trying to empathize, and we try to put our guests in the shoes of either people who have seen the hauntings or even the victims themselves, so they can kind of connect to them while they're at that location. Imagine you're in a stairwell, you can't get out of these locked doors to the roof or the ground floor, and you're just sitting up there in that stairwell, and basically you suffocate. So when we're telling these stories, one specifically, there was a 7-year-old boy who was separated from his mother on the 17th floor, and he died due to smoke inhalation. And that's one of the places on the 17th floor where guests, they report hearing a young boy calling for his mother over and over and over again. They actually hear multiple, especially people who are sensitive to what they call it clairaudient, which is they're sensitive to noises that might be paranormal. They hear multiple people screaming. And when we start telling this, some people start getting short of breath. They start thinking, okay, this is getting intense. And when we get into the story of the Browning family, who was on a vacation at Bally's during a spring of 2007, then this is their words from their interview. They rented a suite on the 21st floor, and their 11-year-old daughter, Emily, had her private room. And you can still go see this room there where this happened. So they went traveling all day, and they finally went to bed really quickly. Everyone who's on vacation knows sometimes you just get pooped and you pass out. Well, they woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they didn't even hear screams coming from the next room. They heard, it was almost like muffled cries. And when they went in there, their daughter, Emily, was literally hyperventilating and couldn't breathe in her bed. And she just kept saying, I need air, I need air. They had never heard her talk like that before. She wasn't choking on anything. And when they finally took her into the hallway, and not just on the floor, actually in the elevator up to the roof away from that floor, the 21st floor, that's when she all of a sudden was able to breathe. And, some people might say, okay, this is maybe she had asthma, or, maybe she just couldn't breathe. But it's the same things that people report when they're talking about suffocating from smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide poisoning, and it's happened multiple times. And we're showing people this, and we're talking about this story. I've actually had guests who actually have to sit down, or, they have to get a paper bag because they actually start hyperventilating. And we don't know if it's because of the location that we're at, or because it's the way we're telling the story, or if it's something unexplainable. And it's really interesting, but also creepy to have that stuff happen. And we've actually had some people faint. Everyone's been okay, but we have people faint in some of these locations where the feelings just get so intense, they get overwhelming.
Man alive, I'm getting freaked out. I'm sitting in my basement at home in Calgary and I'm getting freaked out on this. And I think I'm striking Bally's off of my list of places to stay.
Well, especially not the upper floors. Definitely not the upper floors.
Is it a specific tower at Bally's? Is it the Jubilee Tower?
Honestly, we try to go to both the two different ones, but it's the Jubilee Tower is the one that is still used. That was actually still has part of the construction of when the actually fire took place. It didn't completely destroy, the tower and casino. Obviously, they rebuilt it, but it's definitely that tower where, like I said, 61 out of these 87 people died. And a lot of times people think, they ask, okay, why is this specific place haunted? Oh, okay, yeah, it's got history. Yes, people died there, but usually it's almost tied to the way they died. And the way they died is almost always tragic, whether it's an accident, a fire, someone got murdered, some kind of love betrayal, some kind of rampage. Everything is very specific, and it's the emotions that those people felt while they were there that we believe really tie those that paranormal activity to that specific location.
So I want to talk to about another place in Vegas that's got a haunting, and it's also again another one of my favorite places to stay, the Flamingo. Same reason, I get good rates there. It's a great location. It's a great property. The people are amazing. But of course, the Flamingo, anybody that knows the way back history of the Flamingo, it's got some shady ties in the background.
Yes, most definitely. And, I feel like the Flamingo is one of the, like Bally's is iconic, but Flamingo is the one where people think, okay, this is like hardcore Vegas, this is mobster, this is, so they think when they go there, all right, you know what, this just has some really creepy stories of stuff that actually happened, because everybody, no one's going to underestimate the, the history of the mob. But, when they hear the name Bugsy Siegel and they talk about the Flamingo, it's like easily one of the guests' favorite places. And honestly, even after telling the story, and you find out what happened there, this is one of those places that people actually love it even more, because of, like I said, the Italian mafia and, Murder Incorporated and all the history that he had with Virginia Hill, who he, ended up naming the Flamingo after. And you have this relationship between Bugsy and Virginia that it's like fire and ice, not to be cliche, but, they have some really good times, and then they have some horrible times. People witness them like fighting all the time, this horrible, and also because this is one of the cases where you have a female who actually had a high ranking in the mob. It wasn't just some guy and his girlfriend. It was two cutthroat, cold-hearted people who fell in love with each other, but ended tragically. Honestly, Virginia really thought that it was a bad influence. The Flamingo was a bad influence on Bugsy. Like she said, he was a completely different person when he wasn't there. So maybe you already have, even back then, this location that is making people do things that they wouldn't normally do, or pushing them a little bit over the edge. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. I mean, the Flamingo, they don't necessarily, really go out of their way to promote the mob history, right? I mean, other than I think they still have Bugsy's showroom in there. And then there's a very small little, dedicated to the memory of Bugsy Siegel plaque in the gardens. But that's really it. They don't, like I say, they don't necessarily go out of their way to really promote that mob connection. And I guess part of that is the story is Bugsy Siegel still haunts the Flamingo.
Yes, 100%. And, like I said, if it was, and I'm not an owner, I don't own a hotel, obviously. I'm not saying I wouldn't still be doing tours if I did own a hotel, but I don't own a hotel. But if I did, I think I would milk it, because you have this iconic mobster. Yes, he still haunts the place, but every single person who goes on the tour doesn't just want to hear the stories. They want to see something. They want to say, oh, hey, when they get home, guess who I saw? I saw Bugsy Siegel at the Flamingo. It was crazy. Or I thought I saw him, or I heard him, and, they want to talk about that. So I'm surprised that they don't have their own specific tour, because a lot of locations in different cities, they will like, hey, this place is haunted. We're going to do our own specific tour. And those are some really good tours that go into, one specific location in and out and focus all their entire story on that location.
Very, very cool stuff. I love this kind of stuff. It's so fun to hear. Another location as well, and this one has got quite an interesting history in that a lot of people think it's cursed, just period, because of what it is. I'm talking about the Luxor. And of course, there's all kinds of rumors about the fact that it's cursed because it's built facing the wrong way. And, all these strange things that happen, during construction. I mean, there were people that were actually killed during the construction. And then, of course, there's all these weird accidents and suicides and, people throwing themselves off of the balconies inside and all this kind of weird stuff. Like the Luxor is, it's one of those places where I walk in there and I love the place, but I walk in and there's just sort of this weird feeling that overcomes you when you walk in there.
Yeah. What some people call it, when they go into, the dark pyramid of Vegas, the Luxor, they call it a chaotic energy, or almost an energy that is literally supernatural, that makes you not just uneasy, but almost you feel like, some people say you almost like entered another dimension, not like huge, like you just travel through space, but almost like you just stepped into a place that is a little bit on a different level than what we experience, day by day. And anything called the Dark Pyramid, I mean, some people say it's cursed because it even goes back to like, Egyptian cult, that kind of stuff. And then the Sphinx. But if you look at all the stuff that's happened there, like you said, fights, terrorism, disease outbreaks, anything that can happen and will happen seems like it has happened at the Luxor. And I mean, it was a gorgeous idea. The 30 stories, almost the size of the Great Pyramid in Giza. It's actually 3/4 of the size of that. And that was its inspiration. And, the light beam is one of the strongest in the world, even visible to pilots, and everyone who stays there, they can get this history, from that. But like you said, when they were doing the construction, they wanted to keep low costs. William Bennett, the CEO of Circus Circus is actually the one that built, the Luxor. And, he just, wanted to cut costs, and construction wasn't even complete, but some guests were staying in the room. And during the construction, they were trying to meet this deadline, and, they're not sure if it's just the construction workers or because the cut costs, but you have all these accidents that happen and people dying, the workers, even some guests are reported having died. And those are the people that guests report seeing more than anything.
Well, and there's been weird stories too. I mean, I've heard weird stories of the Luxor about, isn't there a story about a woman that fell off of one of the high levels into, and I don't mean to laugh because there's nothing funny about this, right? But she fell into a buffet area. Yes. I believe you're referring to, I actually don't even know if we have her name, but it was in 1996 and it was the 26th story of the hotel. And the only, I guess you could say, good thing about it is, yes, she fell and immediately fell into this area where there's all these other guests. There's this buffet happening right there. So it was completely visible, scared the crap out of everybody. People were like, what, did she jump? Was it suicide? And, the only good thing about it is that I think it was Clark County's, I think it was Sergeant Bill Keaton said the only good thing about it is that it was over quickly for the woman. But it wasn't over quickly for anyone else. And a lot of the stuff that happened at these locations has been witnessed by several people. You have this giant fire, at Bally's, you have this woman, falling to her death from the 26th floor right in front of everyone into a buffet. And, no one knows what happened. Some people say she was a sex worker, who got HIV, so she killed herself. Other people just believe that she was there by herself and lost all her money, but she's not the only one. There's actually been multiple people have fallen to their death, and they rule them as suicide because they just don't know, And again, I wonder, that comes back to the discussion about the Luxor itself being cursed. I mean, at one point, and maybe I'm making this up in my own head because it sounds like a cool story, but at one point, did they not have Egyptian artifacts in the Luxor? And there's always a little bit of, craziness surrounding the whole Egyptian artifact thing and whether or not, some of those things are cursed in and of themselves.
Well, and see, the thing about that is it's reported, right, that they imported ancient Egyptian artifacts from its King Tut replica display. So even though they wanted to keep it under wraps because, this is cultural stuff and, are they really going to use it to promote a hotel and put a sphinx in front, all that. So a lot of this stuff was replicas, but I have it on pretty good authority that they imported. Some of them were actually original stuff. They just didn't want it to be well known. They wanted to have it in there to have it, maybe a rumor of it and have people think, oh, wow, this is really, good looking Egyptian stuff with this Egyptian theme. And so, of course, that's why. I mean, you can go back and talk about all the people dying and what happened there, but going back thousands of years to all the things that might have happened during Egyptian history, 100% we believe that some of the stuff there was imported, and that that and the shape of the pyramid, mystical properties, a dark energy. It kind of, for whatever reason, it makes me think of Stargate for some reason, even though that wasn't just Egyptians. But you have all this stuff, you bring all this stuff here for promotional purposes, and you don't respect the actual artifacts that came from these historical places. And a lot of times that's what happens with evil spirits, who knows who owned those artifacts? Who knows if they got it from someone's tomb? Some people even report that part of the property is built on top of a graveyard. And, we can't verify that, but it's still operational and it's still successful and people still go there, which is, interesting in itself. And like I said, iconic of Vegas.
And I feel to a certain degree too that Luxor they're tempting fate with their stuff, because they of course are also the home of the Titanic exhibit, which I've been through a couple of times and it's very, very cool. But that's again, you're tempting fate with potentially the spirits of people who died under not so great circumstances.
Absolutely. And especially when it's, places are haunted that have a single person die or, one person commits suicide. And, we'll talk about some of that stuff farther on. But when you get into huge groups of like a whole culture, like Native Americans, some areas, in this case, Egyptians, and then you take and you add that, like you said, to the Titanic exhibit. I mean, one of the most, worst events in American history. Add that to that. And then you add that it might be a burial ground on top of mobsters' victims. And then you add, the whole way that they build the pyramid and they bring the artifacts in there. And then you add, all the people who have died. It's almost like they're trying to create this big giant pile that is just waiting to explode. And ironically, there was actually even a bomb that broke out, not broke out, it was a homemade bomb in a coffee cup that a Luxor food employee had placed on top of his car, and he picked it up and it blew up. There was a homemade bomb in it, and he actually died from the shrapnel. So, they found those men later, but it's one of the few places where multiple deaths happen in many different ways, and you add all the spiritual nature to that, and it's probably, I would say, the one place that I would not want to be for too long out of all the locations we talked about.
I've seen the movie Poltergeist. I know how this is turning out.
Exactly. Yep. Yes, definitely some foretelling in this for the future for the Luxor. So, and you know what? That's going to be on them when something else happens.
Now, another place that I want to talk about, and this place is already nightmarish enough for me for numerous reasons, because again, clowns freak me the hell right out. And of course, on their marquee out front, there's a giant creepy clown. I'm talking about Circus, and there's something about room 123 in Circus.
Right. And like I said, like we were talking about before, Circus was like a corporation that built several different locations. But the one, that obviously we're talking about right now is the Circus Las Vegas. And what's funny is that they describe it as a unique family-friendly hotel casino. And then you get there, and I don't know how many people would. Yes, people have clowns at birthday parties. People, a lot of people do like clowns. It just makes me think of it,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's that simple. And the guy who designed it was Jay Samo. He was the one who just 6 years before actually had conceived Caesar's Palace. which was a huge creation and people, very successful and very iconic. And it's one of the first places that had seen at that time. But when Circus Circus came around, it was unmistakably the most popular one because of the theme, of course. And so I think, that's where they like to put that clown in there because they're talking about the circus. But just like kind of like the Luxor, I feel like, it's not just from haunted movies, like It or, and Stephen King and that kind of stuff. But, stuff actually has happened there. And what's sad is that Jay Samo, the guy who actually designed it, he fell in a bunch of debt because he didn't do something really simple, which was design an actual hotel with the circus and the gambling. So, after all that, he sunk himself into debt. And, he ended up being investigated because he had to borrow money from organized crime and investigated for tax fraud. But there's so many people after that have said that people have fallen from windows, that people, one woman was in room 23, shot her little boy and herself for no reason. And that's what's so weird about this place. Certain places you have maybe a floor that is haunted. You have maybe a couple rooms that something actually happened into. Well, for some reason at Circus Circus, it's multiple rooms on multiple floors. And it's almost like there's no logic to what happened there. It's not like there's even an energy. It's just that it's like the circus. It just, what happens just randomly happens. On room 123 is said to be haunted by the little boy and their mother searching for their boy's father. There's also, they say, a guy named Robert who stays there and who automatically, all of a sudden, randomly appears hanging from the ceiling. We don't have any direct evidence of that. It's just reports. Another one is in room 203 where people speak of like voices that kind of echo into the room and calling for help. And it starts out as a whisper. And if you don't respond, it gets louder and louder and louder. And just eventually turns into a blood-curdling scream. And whether or not you believe these things are happening in these rooms, they've actually made people who have either witnessed them or said they happened leave. So that whole reputation you're talking about, this is one of the places where it really affects an actual location where, they want people to think it's family friendly, but then they have a story from a 20-year employee that said 3 people were killed in the kitchen all in one night, even though there's no hauntings with that. How does that happen? I mean, you go to your local restaurant, a 99 out of 100, nothing interesting happens, maybe more than a grease fire or someone gets food poisoning or,
Right.
Someone refuses to pay a tip. And then you have room 230 and 576 that people are said to, people say that there's paranormal activity. Some people think maybe it's pranksters. Other people think that maybe it's just because the hotel has its annual Halloween extravaganza. So Circus Circus doesn't shy away from a lot of these stories. They really embraced it at being that whole circus theme. But I don't see how they can promote the whole family friendly thing when basically any room you go to on any floor, something crazy might happen.
And Circus Circus has been in the news recently too for a couple of incidents that they've had happen. There was somebody just recently that was murdered there. It was kind of a robbery gone wrong, as opposed to robberies going right, but a robbery gone wrong kind of situation, wasn't it?
Yeah, and of course they probably they might want to keep some of that stuff under wraps, but when you have it's a hotel, it's a casino. And there's actually many locations that have had that happen, recently. But when you already have a reputation like Circus Circus does, and then, this guy shows up, he tries to rob the place. And then, like you said, robbery gone wrong and someone dies, it makes people think just that much more of, okay, there's some kind of energy there that's not just making people die weirdly or having paranormal activity, but actually makes people do things that they don't want to do. And there's other locations that we can get into and talk about that where, people are fine, once before they check into the hotel, and when they get into the hotel, they turn into a completely different person. And that, to me, there's no other description for weird or chaotic or dark energy than that.
Well, what are some of those other locations then? Let's get into that right now here before we go to another separate location altogether. But what are some of those other spots where you've heard reports of that, where people, it's almost kind of like, diving into the Stephen King world again, The Shining, all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. It's almost kind of like that, where people would just become a totally different person. What are some of those other spots?
Yes, definitely. And, I was hoping we get to those, because you can go, like I said, you can go on a tour, even our tour, and hit all these different locations, but you have to do it at least 2 or 3 times. And even then, you're not going to get to all the places where all the crazy stuff happens in Vegas, because there's just so much. And one of those places is Harrah's. And it opened as a holiday casino in 1973, and then was turned into Harrah's in 1992. And the owner, Shelby Williams, actually died at 66 from an aneurysm 6 months before the construction was finished. So for decades now, people report, especially the hotel staff, seeing this old man walk in the lobby, and he starts wandering around the main level, and he's like looking at little things of the design and construction. He's got a notepad, and they say, okay, they're like, sir, how can we help you? And he's like, I'm just glad to see it finished. And it's like, okay, all right. So they try to leave him alone. He walks around, can I help you, sir? I'm just glad to see it's finished. And whenever people get close to him, light bulbs flicker. People become like completely frightened. They've found hotel staff like kind of cowering, behind dressers and desks, and the room just completely turns dark and uninviting. But they always look up to see this 60-year-old man standing there with his notepad. And whenever he came in, the lights would go out, and it was almost like this completely different energy was there. Even though he seemed happy that the hotel was finished, it's almost like he wishes he was there, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of places, and this is also one of the locations where you have like a random tourist who was on her vacation for her birthday in Las Vegas, and she's just sitting at the casino gambling, doing her thing in casino. And all of a sudden, there's one of these robberies gone wrong, and a security guard pulls his gun, Frank Willis, and he spots the two thieves. They start shooting each other, and this random woman, Heather, who everybody loved her so much they called her the Maui Rainbow, was randomly just hit in the head while she was gambling about 40 feet away. And what's unique about this is that when anyone ever goes to that area, even if they don't know what happened to her and what happened to Heather, they sit at any of those slot machines, they try to play, all of a sudden they become very, very anxious. Their anxiety level goes up. They start looking around. They start getting very paranoid. And it's almost like her ghost is there, making people, trying to warn them that, hey, you know what, something might not happen to you right now, but if I had been a little more paranoid, or if I had felt these feelings, then I might have done something about it, and something might happen to you, because it's Vegas and it's because it's Harrah's. Now, the most interesting one, as far as the energy one, is the Cromwell. And I don't know if you've ever been over to the Cromwell on the Strip.
Numerous times. It's been terrible to me at the slot machines. That explains why it's cursed to me.
Well, I mean, there you go. It's not just bad luck, but it's almost ill will. And a lot of people thought it was doomed from the start. People were protesting it because the owner, it's named after Oliver Cromwell, who was responsible in the 1640s for the deaths of thousands of Irish Catholics. And so a lot of people, the people protested. People still protest it to this day. And it also sits on a foundation where a lot of hotels tried to make an impression, and every single one of them went bankrupt and closed after a few years. So bad luck right there. There's your bad luck of the slot machines. But every single time it happens, when it changes management, people say it just feels grimmer and more solemn. They said that they used to feel peace and relaxation. Now they leave feeling tired, anxious, depressed, and suicidal. And one guy that was able to be interviewed, Andrew Murphy, had the worst story about that out of anything I've ever heard. So basically, he goes to check in. He was working his butt off. He was stressed out. And he's like, you know what? I need a week off. So he gets a week off. He goes to check into the hotel. And he had just won some money at a different casino. And this is his exact words. I remember arriving at the hotel in a very cheery mood. I had a stressful job at the time, so a chance to enjoy some R&R had me in high spirits. The moment the bellboy opened the door to my room, I stepped in, and that's when I felt it. It washed over me like a wave, the misery, the blackness, my stomach started to hurt. I went over and just sat on the couch for hours, even though I had all these activities planned. Nothing seemed fun. What was the point in going out? I don't want anyone to see me. And so then basically, he just ordered room service for almost the entire time. And then it became like a cycle. He was angry at himself for ruining his vacation, and he was lethargic. He didn't even leave the the hotel for the last 3 days. And it followed him to back when he returned home after he checked out. And he missed work. He almost lost his job. He couldn't get out of bed. He said the dark gray cloud followed him everywhere. It was like a curse. And after 3 months, he finally started feeling better. And he doesn't understand why or how, but his exact words were, I know I will never go back to that hotel again, maybe not even Vegas. And employees who work there, they have a really low retention rate because employees, they don't hold the job. They said it's not demanding more than any other job. There's just darkness and depression that weighed on them every day. You have head chefs that just don't show up for their shift. And they went to check on this one head chef. Supposedly, this one isn't completely verified, but they went to check on him 2 days later, and they said they found his door unlocked and he was lying on his kitchen floor with his wrist slit open. So is it really the hotel? Is it the bankruptcy? Is it the bad luck that has all that pain and anguish? All the people that have lost their money, we don't know. It's just a complete feeling of energy. Some people even attribute it to the peyote tribe that had occupied that land in the past. So, a lot of times people just call it from the tribe, the land of death. And if someone called that to a place that I might be thinking about spending my vacation, you better believe that I'm going to have second thoughts.
Yeah, no kidding. It's funny that you talk about the energy in that place because, different and coming back to the energy in different places. I mean, the chaotic energy in the Luxor makes perfect sense. I know exactly what you're talking about. You come in the front door and it's almost like overstimulation, and it's so open that the noise just carries and it's all over the place. And speaking about the Cromwell, the energy in there, it's just no matter what time of the day it is. And I get it, Vegas casinos, none of them have windows or anything like that. So you can't see outside, but no matter what time of the day you walk into the Cromwell in that casino, it's just dark. Everything is, right. It's black and it's red. It's like walking into the Addams Family house.
Yeah.
And just the decor, it's that. So I completely understand the dark energy and how it just kind of sucks the energy right out of you.
Right. And, you think that someone would have remarked on that and that, they might have thought, okay, yeah, we're trying to make people think it's, nighttime all the time, like Alaska, where you have 6 months of partying or, where you're going to have fun, whatever it is. But it's almost like instead of contrasting it, it just feeds into the dark energy that's already there. And, someone maybe want to get them a different interior designer because it's not helping the guests that stay there or people who might want to stay there.
And then one other spot I do want to talk about as well. And I honestly, until I kind of started doing some reading and some research on this, it didn't even click to me that it was a haunted spot in Vegas. And I've walked past it a million times, particularly when I'm on my way for my $7.99 steak and eggs at Ellis Island.
Right.
Flamingo and Koval.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a very famous spot of a very famous shooting and murder, essentially.
Oh, yeah. Well, if people don't know the exact corner, of Flamingo and Koval, they know what happened in Vegas and they know what happened or supposedly happened to Tupac there. And, some people say, okay, it's just the legend that makes it so, so supposedly haunted. But actually, we did a top 10 of what are the most haunted places in Vegas. And, you wouldn't think that this is one of the top ones because people don't report seeing, all kinds of hauntings or, car crashes or that kind of stuff. But because of the conspiracy theories, people actually say that there's sightings of Tupac more often than any other place or any other in Vegas and maybe in other places that we've seen as far as the celebrity goes. And people will literally say they see him with his bandana on, standing there by his car at the corner. Some people report to hear gunshots. So, it's a different kind of haunting as far as it's not like a hotel that burned down, or it's not a place where people are jumping to their deaths. But you have this iconic person, this iconic musician who has so many fans, so many followers, many whom still believe he's alive. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's kind of like Elvis. There's this limbo, and whenever you have limbo, to me, that's almost an invitation limbo and uncertainty. That's an invitation for people to start seeing things, whether they're real or not. I've had so many guests and even guides say that they've seen him. I personally believe that it is haunted, but it's not the same as the other places. However, it's right up there in the top 10 list. People actually search that location as far as hauntings more than any other location in Vegas, if you look at Google searches.
Well, and again, as you say, it's not a high profile location. It's not Bally's, it's not the Flamingo, it's not Luxor. It's kind of a random street corner off the Vegas Strip that's not really on anybody's radar except maybe perhaps the hardcore Tupac Shakur fans. Yeah,
100%. And maybe it's, like the way it happened. I mean, in any death like that, it's going to be unexpected, obviously. But I mean, he's there for a birthday party, and he's going to a boxing match and he's just in the car and, just whatever actually happened, whatever the police report says, he shot twice in the chest, once in his thigh and another one in his arm. People say it was taken to the University Medical Center in Southern Nevada, but many people say, his body actually disappeared before then. But it was such a, how do you put it? Such a simple thing that he was doing. It's not like he was there starting a gang war, or at least not that we know of. It's not like he started shooting at someone. He's literally just coming from a birthday party. And I think it was the sudden death, if you will, of him, like that no one expected, that just made people, one, feel for it, but number two, all these conspiracy theories, of course, start popping up and they don't go away. Some conspiracy theories die after a while. This is not one of them.
That is so cool. I love it. Are there any other spots that you want to hit on while I've got you here? Any other creepy, spooky spots that maybe we haven't hit on, or do you want to save it for the tours?
No, you know what? I will save everything else for the tour except for one, because this is one of my favorite ones, because I feel either one, people don't know as much about it, and number two is that it's just that creepy once you get the picture in your head. And the place I'm talking about is the Link, and I don't know if you've ever stayed there, or you ever were able to do any research on that in the past. But do you know anything about the Link before I get into it?
I've never stayed there. I've been through it numerous times. I know that, it was the Imperial Palace way back in the day, and then it became the Quad and then the Link. I cried heavily when they closed the auto collection, because that was one of my favorite things to visit in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
There was so much cool stuff to see there. But I'm not familiar with its supernatural history at all.
Then that's the thing, is that they try to cover it up. Vegas, the tourism board, and even, of course, the owners. And of course, you have that showroom, you have the parking garages, which at that time had the world's largest classic car collection, as you know. And this was all the brainchild of the vision of Ralph Engelstead, who was the new owner at that time, who was a businessman and a philanthropist, and he was independent. So he was able to do kind of what he wanted. And when it was Imperial Palace at that time, that's when he did the car show, and he had all the pools, the nightclub, fitness centers, all that. He wanted it to be the world's largest private hotel. And when he died in 2002, it was actually the second largest private hotel in the world. And then since then, it's changed ownership, and it's now known as Link Hotel and Casino. But while he was there, some weird stuff happened. And, they call him kind of eccentric, entrepreneurial, but eccentric and enigmatic, because he had all these ideas. Some people would say if he gave you his word, that was his bond. He was a genius as far as business goes, an industry pioneer. He did all these things, but on the complete opposite side, you have these dark secrets, and people don't know if it was just almost like a hobby for him, and he wasn't really into this stuff, but he was actually supposedly a huge Nazi sympathizer. And
really? Wow.
Yeah. Crazy. And what he had this so-called war room, and this is verified. We actually had a collection of World War II Nazi memorabilia, and at the centerpiece, he had a giant portrait of himself painted just like Adolf Hitler. So he has this room. It's almost like a shrine to himself and Hitler, and even worse than that. And he's going to, and later on we'll talk about how he says it wasn't how people portrayed it. In 1986 and 1988, he actually had parties to celebrate Hitler's birthday, April 20th, with fellow Nazi sympathizers. They had T-shirts the bartenders had to wear reading Adolf Hitler European Tour 1939 to 45.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not making this up. He actually made employees go to this because, he thought it was going to boost morale. Somehow in his twisted mind, he thought that. So these Führer bashes, as they were called, they had a cake, they had employees. And one of them, the cakes was super huge. It had Hitler's name on it. They had German ballads playing, and people were afraid to say anything because they didn't want to lose their job. One of these employees was actually a Jewish employee. We don't know his name, but he refused to cut the cake. I mean, he's thinking this is a huge insult. So he left, and the employee actually ended up getting fired because Ralph thought, okay, he's actually, going against employee morale and doing this for the employees for whatever reason. So corporate leaders and other people try to keep it secret. Some people found out about it. So the Nevada Gaming Board fined him $1.5 million for supposedly soiling the reputation of Vegas gaming industry. And that was like pocket change for him. So it was like a slap on the wrist. So even though we didn't hear any more of these Nazi-themed parties, then happened some of the paranormal or weird activity. One thing that he tried to do supposedly is that Ralph Engelstad tried to write to the architect of the Hitler's triumphal arch that he wanted to erect in Berlin, and it was Albert Speer, and he wrote to Mrs. Speer, the widow, trying to get her to sell him his plans because he wanted to build his own Hitler arch at the hotel.
Jesus.
And it just keeps going and going. And the weirdest thing was, if you know anything about Hitler, you know that he was a huge fan of the occult. So, he's, whether you watch, what do you call it, Captain America and Hydra, or the actual history where he really was into the occult, people also say Engelstad was too, because Hitler was his idol. So a former manager at the Imperial Palace in the 1980s, again, wanted to remain anonymous. He was making his rounds, and he heard soft chanting and drums beating from behind the door of the war room. So he goes to the door, he listens for a minute, and he opens the door, and it got really loud, of course, and he saw a group of 7 men gathered in a circle, all wearing cloaks and wearing masks. And in the center of them, supposedly, was an altar of a Nazi uniform and a hat. And they were all chanting, not German. It was like a different language, like maybe something from a cult, maybe an ancient language. And the manager says, he swears on everything, that he saw the uniform start to move and slowly rise into the air as if an invisible body had filled the clothing. And of course, at that moment, he freaks out, runs away down the hall, and he quits the next day. And when some occultist researchers heard what he described after, finding him and interviewing him, they said it was really, really similar to a seance ritual. in which a group, gathers to communicate with the dead. However, they didn't just think with the uniform in there, it wasn't just a seance, but it almost seemed like they were actually trying to resurrect someone, most likely Hitler. And Engelstad's fascination with the Third Reich and that Hitler had been interested in the cult makes people think they really wanted to try to raise Hitler from the dead and usher in a whole new era of Nazi supremacy. So I love this story, even though it creeps the heck out of me.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that. And I just think that is one of the coolest stories where people find out something about not just the location, but someone who was there and some really crazy stuff that happened behind closed doors. Because who knows how much of this stuff happened that didn't get out. Luckily, someone was able to tell the story, whether it's 100% true or not. And I mean, I just eat it up.
That's just amazing. That's an incredible story. That's wow. I'm blown away by that. Just absolutely blown away by that.
Yeah.
Again, you mentioned we'll save the rest of it for the tours because I think this has definitely made me want to, I got a trip coming up in December. My wife and I are always looking for different things to do when we do our trips to Vegas. This has landed squarely in my radar in a big bad way. So I think we'll be looking at this as a lovely little pre-Christmas event for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people, they do a lot of walking during the day too also, but we try to keep it like very, like I said, historical, informative, educational, creepy, spooky, hauntings, all that kind of stuff, some lesser known facts that a lot of people don't know. But also try not to make it like, a 3-hour long walk. It's a nice tour and we try to hit more locations than a lot of tours, but it's a nice tour in a nice small area to some big iconic places. And then you find out a lot of stuff that you didn't know. So I think it's a unique and memorable experience for most people.
If people want to get info on tickets and information, and you guys have a blog as well that chronicles some really interesting stuff, you guys are online, you're on social media, you're all over the place, right?
100%. The easiest way to find out information about the tour, about tour details, we have a tour preview, and of course we have our blog that we just finished, not just a top 10 article, but a series that actually delved even more into each one of those locations, and got a lot of history and background on that, is vegasghosts.com. And you go there and it gives you all the information. You can book straight through the website. It also has a link to Facebook and YouTube. And Facebook is really simple. It's facebook.com/Vegas Ghost. And you can see not just all our how many followers we have over there, but we post the links to the blogs on there. But we also share stuff from other places that are into ghost stories. We place links about certain things that we hear about. And, sometimes there's just, of course, some good old fashioned fun about paranormal investigations and would you ever visit a haunted house, or where would you haunt if you were a ghost? Just a lot of fun stuff. But specifically for the tours, vegasghost.com. It has all the information there. You can also get our contact information on there and join our newsletter, contact@vegasghost.com. I'm always here to reply to any email questions, whether it's about the tour or whether it's, like you, Jeff, and you have questions about some of these locations without trying to spoil it too much, of course. I'm happy to answer any questions. And we get a lot of pictures also from people who think they've caught stuff on their camera, or even stories of them, feeling like they've been haunted or experienced the supernatural on there. And that's another way to actually get those pictures to us so we can put it on our Facebook, that kind of stuff. But I just want to say one more thing that what I think, and I know I told you this before, what sets our tours apart is that we have some of the best guides in the country who really put a lot of time and effort into learning the stories, learning the history, practicing it, presenting it, spending their time sometimes, after a full-time job during the day, going out at night and hanging out with locals and tourists and giving them all this information that maybe some of it they know, a lot of it they don't, and having a really good time on these tours, and even getting interactive with the EMF detectors and that kind of stuff. But we really try to focus on research, history, authenticity, mystery, and of course, some really good old-fashioned ghost stories and ghost hauntings.
Joseph, I appreciate you taking the time to chat today. Thank you so much. And I look forward to checking out the tour myself.
Right, Deb. Hey, I'll be looking out for you in December. All right, don't let me down.
Once again, if you want information on Las Vegas ghosts, check them out online at vegasghosts.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook at Vegas Ghosts. And that brings this episode of the podcast to a close. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show or any other episode for that matter, or you're after suggestions for your next Las Vegas vacation of where to stay, where to eat, what to do, or what to see, or you've got ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please reach out to me via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas, or drop me an email directly at jeff@walkernewmedia.com. As for my next Las Vegas trip, by the time you're listening to this episode, I'll actually be on it. Sort of. My wife and I are flying into Vegas to pick up a rental car for a drive out to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. We're going to spend a couple of days touring around there, then head down to Phoenix for a few days, and finally back up to Las Vegas for a quick two-nighter to watch the Winnipeg Jets and the Vegas Golden Knights at T-Mobile Arena on November 2nd. I have booked a trip for the end of November, though, November 17th to 20th. I'll be staying at a new-to-me spot, Planet Hollywood, so I'm looking forward to reviewing that property for the podcast, as well as lining up a few new spots to eat and attractions to check out. I'm also in the process of setting up a few interviews for upcoming episodes of the podcast while I'm in town as well. I have to say, it's nice to finally have a couple of trips on the calendar. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. Make sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Podbean. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been episode number 41 of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast, a Walker New Media production.